So I'm Adam Shorland, also Adshaw on most things. I've been working for Wikimedia Germany for 5 to 6 years now on Wikidata and Wikibase, also with Daniel for quite a lot of that time. And I'm currently the tech lead for Wikidata and Wikibase. This talk's going to be very much focused on a project called WBStack that has appeared over the last couple of months. But I'd also love to talk more about Wikimedia, MediaWiki, Wikibase, Wikidata, Docker, Kubernetes, deployment, and all of those kinds of things. But yeah, this talk will focus on this thing called WBStack, which I doubt any of you have ever heard about. The story of this project starts around about 4 or 5 years ago at a MediaWiki technical conference. And I think that was roughly around the same time as the birth of the MediaWiki stakeholders group. And I started getting more interested in sort of MediaWiki and extensions and Wikibase for third parties. As interest built up around Wikibase, I created some Docker images. Interest continued to build, and I created this WBStack project. And yeah, this will be a very high level run through of everything, but I hope it will be interesting and introduce everyone to some of these things. So what is WBStack? It's a side project that I've been working on for a few years, and it first saw the light of day in WikidataCon at the end of 2019. And it combines MediaWiki, Wikibase, the BlazeGraph query service that is part of Wikibase, and also the Sparkle user interface on top of that, and a few other things around the Wikibase ecosystem as well. There's a website, but there's not much there, so there's not much point in going there right now. But some people might not know what Wikibase is at all. There was a good talk yesterday that actually went into quite a lot of depth about what Wikibase is and what you can do with it. This is going to be a very high-level introduction again, and it's a suite of software partly made up of MediaWiki extensions that allows you to manage data and open link data. And yeah, it mainly focuses around a few MediaWiki extensions. And what is Wikidata? Wikidata is the primary user of Wikibase. It's a Wikimedia project focused around open data, open multilingual data, accessible in a standard form, and open under a free license, so it's under CC0. And yeah, Wikidata runs Wikibase, and it's run by the Wikimedia Foundation. So in order to understand this a bit more, let's have a look at Wikidata through some pictures. This is, as NASA are here with us, as they often are in these MediaWiki stakeholder groups. I decided to look at one of the Apollo missions, and this is the Apollo mission, Apollo 8, on Wikidata. The first thing that, well, one of the first things that you'll see down the right-hand side is a collection of links to all of the different Wikipedia language articles for the Apollo 8 mission. If we move forward, you'll see I've expanded this large section at the top, which includes labels, descriptions, and aliases describing the Apollo 8 mission in a few hundred different languages. Moving further down the page, there's data about the Apollo 8 mission. It's an instance of human spaceflight. It's part of the Apollo space program. Here's a lovely logo. And there's lots of other information on this page, such as the duration of the mission that follows it, the mass of the vehicle used in the mission at launch and also landing, crew members, and a lot of other information. And also there's a collection of identifiers that help contribute to the linked open data web. So another part of the Wikibase ecosystem is the query service, and here's the query service for Wikidata. And this is specifically looking at the crew members that rode on vehicles that were upon Saturn V rockets that have Wikimedia Commons images. With a little bit of sparkle, and you end up getting this lovely, lovely result. So that's an overview of what Wikibase can do through the eyes of Wikidata. But there are more people that want to use Wikibase than just Wikidata. And now the next slide won't go. So it's always more complex than just one extension as well. I mean, if you want to run this Wikibase set of extensions and services, you end up needing core MediaWiki. You need multiple MediaWiki extensions for Wikibase. Also, if you're running MediaWiki, obviously you're going to want other extensions, spam protection, and things like that. You also end up needing various ways to query all of this data. If you're running a wiki, you probably need to set up things like emails as well, and all kinds of other things, caches that you just don't want to necessarily think about. It's quite a complicated world. And so a few years ago, I decided to try and simplify this, in my opinion, simplify this, probably because I understand what Docker is, and lots of people that potentially I was trying to simplify this for don't understand what Docker is, and that's quite a barrier. So in 2017, I created a set of Wikibase Docker images that ended up getting adopted by Wikimedia Germany, and we manage and maintain them now. And at some point after these Docker images were created, we also made the MediaWiki community maintained Docker images that are on Docker Hub. And these Docker images were intended to reduce the immediate barrier to getting some of these complicated things running. For Wikibase, it's the query service is the complicated part compared with just MediaWiki. And you end up with a Docker Compose file that looks something like this. Again, to me, Docker Compose is simplifying things. To others, Docker Compose is just another barrier to entry. One typo in there. So yeah, I think I already covered this. Yeah, the Wikibase Docker images are different to the MediaWiki community images, but they do use the MediaWiki images as a base. The Wikibase images have a bit of extra magic sprinkled on top to make various things in the initial setup easier, including running install.php, setting up some OAuth consumers for various tools, initiating some indexes, and they are maintained by Wikimedia Germany, and they will continue to be maintained. They're very much in their first version at the moment, but that will continue to progress through time. So yeah, as I said, we replaced some barriers with other barriers, basically, Docker. And also the cost is still a barrier. You still need a place to run all of this technology and all of these services. And the knowledge for the area of Wikibase and some of the other Wikibase services, and also MediaWiki, is scarce. There's a lot of people here that have a lot of that knowledge. But also it can be quite siloed and sometimes hard to connect people. The cost of running a totally empty version of that Docker Compose file that I showed earlier, which contains about 6 or 7 services, ends up costing about $40 to $80 a month in any of the big clouds. And that's because some of the indexes and databases used end up using a lot of memory just to run totally empty. And so you end up needing at least 4 gigabytes of memory to run a totally empty version of this stack. And so my next iteration was some sort of shared platform. And that's when I started working on and created this thing that I call WBStack. There's a little video here that hopefully will play, which is the video that I showed at WikidataCon a few months ago, which is a walkthrough of the bare bones alpha platform that people can play around with. It allows you to create an account, get your confirmation email, go and create your wiki with some name, some subdomain of a random name, and then instantly go and load it. The process of this with the Docker images and the Docker compose file would take 5 to 10 minutes from a totally empty machine, and this allows you to have a Wikibase in, depending on how quickly you type, about a minute. And all of the resources are pulled under the hood. And it doesn't just set up MediaWiki with Wikibase, it also sets up a collection of other services and some tools that have been developed by the Wikimedia and Wikibase community. So this is going into quick statements, which is automatically connected to MediaWiki via OAuth. And there's a similar thing in the Docker images that we have for quick statements and Wikibase. And it's another user interface that allows you to edit MediaWiki without using MediaWiki directly. And of course, all of this ends up in MediaWiki, as we'll see in special recent changes, and the edits all end up there. So under the hood, all of this runs using Docker and Kubernetes. Here's a very interesting diagram of what it actually looks like. Everything is running on Kubernetes. It doesn't rely on any third-party services, so that it has some nice portability and can essentially run anywhere. Yes, I won't go into too much detail about this. So yeah, setting up and managing vanilla MediaWiki is hard, but Wikibase, including all of the extensions and services, is, well, we considered it a different level. You have to start running a Java Blaze Graph query service, and they're not the sort of things that you can do easily on shared hosting. And lots of the parties that are interested in Wikibase aren't necessarily from the tech world, but they're rather galleries, libraries, museums that don't have that. Again, that's why the barriers to entry are higher for them. And people want to spend time working with their data, not necessarily managing their wikis and all of the services around their wiki. So the main focus of WBStack is to hide lots of the complexity that's seen around MediaWiki and Wikibase. It hides lots of the configuration. It's great that MediaWiki is so configurable, but sometimes when you just want one very specific thing, you don't need a lot of that. It also removes the need to worry too much about security and scaling and things from whoever's using it. And the main focus is to allow for easy testing, analysis, and evaluation of Wikibase. So if you want to try out Wikibase, rather than going through the convoluted setup process, you'd be able to have one in a matter of seconds. MediaWiki currently comes along for free in this, as Wikibase is a MediaWiki extension, but it's definitely not the main focus of the WBStack project. And yeah, it's not intended to be very customizable outside of what is provided for you. There's room for extensions and things to be added for all of the sites and to the platform as a whole, but not for sort of custom extensions really to be added within it. Although technically speaking, it's totally possible. It's definitely not a focus now. Currently, it's in a sort of lockdown state of an invitation-only alpha version ever since WikidataCon. And there's currently about 150 Wikibases of varying levels of activity running there that were created by about 80 users. And there's roughly 160,000 edits across those sites so far. And as this was very much a side project to begin with, it's not currently under any sort of Wikimedia umbrella. The operational costs running on Google Kubernetes engine is currently funded by rhizome.org. Very nice people. Thank you very much for that. And all of the development's currently unfunded on my side, but there will be a slide about that later. It might even be the next slide. It is the next slide. So the future. Wikimedia Germany is going to be carrying out some work around Wikibase as a service, and it's planned for the second half of 2020. And the product manager for Wikibase, whose realm this falls under, is Samantha Alipo, who is in this call with us, but I'm not sure if she quite has the internet to be able to speak, but we will find out later. And then there's a couple of links that link to basically all of the content that's in this presentation in varying forms in the blog post at the bottom, and then also Wikidata, the Wikibase website, and the WBStack site itself. And hopefully I should have roughly half of my time for any questions and things. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so that I can see the whole of Zoom again.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And I know that there's some questions from earlier from the YouTube stream. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to raise their hand. Brian, did you want to read the YouTube questions to start? Sure.
Some of these questions were asked actually before your presentation, but I'll go ahead and ask them. The Wikidata community has developed useful tools to enrich, refine, and adjust their knowledge base. These tools are stored in various GitHub repositories. The users have to gather them from different repositories and adapt them to their MediaWiki applications. Examples of these tools are quick statements and SHEX. Does the Wikibase community manage to directly integrate these important tools to Wikibase?
So there are quite a few tools which already work for any Wikibase. Quick statements is an example of that. You can configure it to point to whatever Wikibase you want to, and that is, for example, why it's in WBStack. I think essentially it comes down to whoever wrote the tool and whether or not they've made it super configurable. Normally it's not that hard a thing to solve. Normally it's just pointing to the right Wikibase instance rather than hard coding Wikidata. But depending on the complexity of the tool, there might be a few extra things to do. But most of the tools that exist for Wikidata, yeah, should be able to work for any Wikibase.
Okay. And then the second question, applications of Wikibase can be various. For example, Wikibase can be used as a data management software for a school or a sales data software for a company. Does the Wikibase community manage to differentiate different data models for each type of business?
So the data model itself is, there's only one data model currently that's shared between all Wikibases, which is this concept of properties, items, and within items, labels, descriptions, aliases, and then statements, which is where your data actually is. Within that data model, though, you can create whatever ontology you want, and you can have whatever level of flexibility you want within that. Wikimedia Germany is currently working on the next stage of federation, which would be federated properties, which would allow you to use the ontology as defined on Wikidata within your own Wikibase. So rather than having to redefine a property for instance of, or a property for coordinate location, you would just be able to use all of these directly from Wikidata. I think that covers most of that question.
Thank you. And the last question from the YouTube channel, is the Wikibase community working on an automatic method to update Wikibase software used in supporting a given database?
Yeah, I read that one in advance. I'm not quite sure what it means, but I could definitely talk to whoever asked that afterwards, I think. But I don't quite follow that one. I could say something quickly, which is essentially Wikibase follows the core of Wikibase follows the same update process as MediaWiki. And as we manage to improve the update process for MediaWiki, we will improve the update process for Wikibase. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. We have a few more questions in Zoom. First, Greg.
Thanks, Adam, for that great talk. And I was really impressed looking at the slides that you showed about the Kubernetes layout and the Docker setup. And like you said, Docker could be viewed as another barrier to entry for those who aren't familiar with it. Fortunately, you are. For those of us that would like to learn more about Docker and Kubernetes, maybe especially how it's used at the Foundation or Wikimedia Germany, can you give us any tips on where some good resources are for that?
So within the foundation, the sort of Docker world is still very much up and coming. MediaWiki doesn't run within Docker there yet, but various other services do. In terms of resources, other than reading just the Docker documentation and the Kubernetes documentation and understanding the fundamentals there, I'm not sure what else I would have to link to. There's definitely some things on my blog, which again is linked in these slides. These slides aren't public anyway yet, but they will be, where I've sort of blogged about sort of this whole journey over the last few years in creating these Docker images and various problems along the way. But other than that, I don't think there's a strong sort of MediaWiki focused location for any of this yet.
Well, good. I'll be checking out your blog. Thank you.
All right, next question from Yaron.
Hi, if someone asked you for a recommendation for their site between Wikibase, Semantic MediaWiki, and Cargo, what would you say? I mean, how do you see Wikibase fitting in with those other extensions or applications?
So I would say that I have absolutely no idea at the moment, because I still, to this day, have never really used Semantic MediaWiki. I've definitely spent the last 6 years of my life in the Wikibase world. I think there's a lot of potential for both Wikibase and Semantic MediaWiki and a lot of the extensions around Semantic MediaWiki to work together. And I think this came up in some of the talks either earlier today or yesterday. In fact, it was the talk yesterday which also touched on Wikibase, where the UI and data entry was discussed a bit. And it's definitely something that isn't as mature in Wikibase currently as it is for Semantic MediaWiki. That's partly down to the fact that Wikibase is used less and is a much newer thing. And we're only in the last year, a couple of years, sort of starting to get out into use cases other than Wikidata, and and exploring all of those different areas. But yeah, I think Yaron Dadauer as well is looking at trying to merge some of the different areas of sort of Wikibase and Semantic MediaWiki and the extensions around there as well. So I'm sure we will find more out over the coming year.
I guess you haven't heard of Cargo.
I have heard of Cargo, and I also I listen to all of your podcasts, but I've never used anything.
Thank you.
Semantic,
okay, okay.
I've never used anything on the Semantic MediaWiki side of things, so I just can't. Yeah, I can't really say at all, really.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question from Joel.
Thanks, Adam, for that talk. I was really interested in the talk yesterday you referred to about smart cities, because I did an experiment about 6-7 years ago, NYCP using Semantic MediaWiki, and we just pumped data at scale, and we had millions of pages and concepts in it, and it was really good. At the time, Wikibase was still not that mature for us to do any experiments. And I was just wondering, are there any other people doing experiments in pumping a lot of open data, link open data into Wikibase, apart from the one that was mentioned yesterday, Tanisha?
There are definitely some other experiments. As to the size of them, I'm not totally sure off the top of my head. If I try and reshare my screen and not lose where Zoom is, I'll quickly reshare my screen. This is a public Wikibase registry that was created at some point, and there's a timeline of all of the sort of publicly found Wikibase instances on here. And yeah, there's, as you can see, Wikidata was created all the way back here in 2012. There's sort of not much external use in the last couple of years is where it's really picked up. And so Samantha is messaging me because she can't talk because her internet is not great. But the German National Library are looking at using Wikibase, and they're experimenting with 60 million records, which would be sort of the biggest use of Wikibase outside of Wikidata currently.
Great. And one more follow-up question. I'm just interested, is Wikidata being used by Google to power all the knowledge graphs right now?
I would say it's definitely being used by them. It's not the only thing feeding into their massive sets of data. This question came up on Reddit a couple of days ago, actually. Yeah, all of the big tech companies will be using Wikidata in the same way that they use Wikipedia. It's slightly easier to see with Wikipedia because they have to attribute it in some way, but as all of the data in Wikidata is under CC0, it's a lot easier to hide it because you just don't have to reference the project anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
And the last question we have is from Peter Meyer.
Yeah, I haven't seen these wiki bases other than Wikidata, but that diagram helped. Do I understand that the classic use case then is some institution with a lot of metadata or a catalog to offer, and the reason they're running Wikibase would be to keep all that organized and offer a linked data, a web API to that information?
Yeah, so one of the lots of institutions see what's happening with Wikidata, and they essentially want to do it with their own data. Wikibases and obviously the Sparkle endpoint allow like querying between all of those data sets in very nice ways. And as we progress through this idea of federation with Wikibase and the shared ontology, then hopefully all of this just becomes more and more useful across different people using Wikibases.